Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Katie Peace, and I'm the Director of Communications for the Preservation League of New York State. If you found your way to this webinar and you're not already familiar with the League, we are a New York statewide nonprofit focused on investing in people and projects that champion the essential role of preservation in community revitalization, sustainable economic growth, and the protection of our historic buildings and landscapes. The League does this in every corner of New York State, from the east end of Long Island to the North Country to Buffalo, through lots of different programs. We offer technical services. We have our flagship grant programs that we do through the New York State Council on the Arts, our 7 to Save program of endangered historic sites, which we are currently accepting nominations for right now with the deadline of this Friday. We do public policy and advocacy work at the local, state, and federal levels. We have our Excellence in Historic Preservation Awards, and we have a variety of online programs, including webinars like the one you are joining us for today. So we're excited to shine a light on the Pyrrhus Concer Action Committee design team and the work that they've been doing over the last several years to properly reinterpret that site and bring it back to life after its unfortunate demolition. We think that, the Action Committee really demonstrates how interdisciplinary coalition building can support historic preservation efforts, especially centered around issues of equity and justice. And it's a very interesting case study. And so we're excited that several members of the design team are with us today to talk about the work that they've been doing. And kind of guiding the ship, so to speak, is Dr. Georgette Greer-Key. She's the Executive Director and Curator of the Eastville Community Historical Society in Sag Harbor. She is the president of the Long Island Historical Societies, as well as being a very valued member of the Preservation League of New York State's Board of Trustees. She was recently named vice president of the board for the Museum Association of New York, a post that she will take up this coming April. She is an adjunct professor at CUNY Medgar Evers College and director of the Long Island History Institute at SUNY Nassau Community College. She is one of the most outspoken advocates for the preservation and celebration of Long Island history, especially African American and indigenous history. And New York and Long Island is very lucky to have her. And I could go on and on about Georgia's accolades, but I'm going to let her speak for herself. A couple of housekeeping notes. This is being recorded, so it will be on our YouTube channel and then on our website and social media. So if you can't stay for the whole thing, you will be able to find the recording there. If you have questions for the panelists, you can drop them in the Q&A box. The chat will remain open for general comments and chatter, but any questions should go in the Q&A. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Georgette Greer-Key, and she is going to introduce the rest of the panel. Georgette?
Hello, everybody. So everybody has their screen off. You're welcome to turn it on. My name is Dr. Georgette Greer-Key, and thank you for that wonderful introduction, Katie, and thank you to the Preservation League for having us and hosting us on this last celebration. Happy Black History Month to everybody who's joining us here today. I see that Brenda Simmons has turned on her camera and she's joining us all the way from the beautiful island of St. Martin. And we have Miss Nicole Jean Christian. Thank you for joining us as well. We also have with us Chris Voorhees. Please turn on your camera. We have also Chick Voorhees, please turn on your camera. And we have the Honorable Fred Thiel with us. Please turn on your camera. We have the Honorable Mayor Jesse Warren. Please turn on your camera. And we have, of course, Esquire Keith Brown. Please turn on your camera. So this is just a small portion of our team. And we have the assistant who keeps us all together. We have Miss Miranda Weber. I don't know if she wants to turn on her camera, but that is the other mayor's box. So you have the Hollywood squares of preservation and the Pyrrhus Concer Action Team here with you today. And as I say, this is just a small portion of our team. I don't know if Chris is able to help me out, but you're shaking your head, yes or no. But before we get started, we just want to give you a little understanding of our team. This is a small portion, and I'm hoping that Chick will be able to tell you a little bit about our team when we get going. But our design team consists of a project manager, an architect, an infrastructure engineering, a civil and site engineer, a traffic engineer. We had to do traffic planning, transit site planning, and civil engineering. We have a senior environmental planner. We have a zoning, two zoning attorneys actually. And then from the public engagement and governmental municipal side, we have elected officials. As you see, we have two illustrious elected officials with us here. We work on the state, the town, and the village level. We have preservation people with us in organizations. So such, we have, of course, the Preservation League of New York State, and then we have Preserve Long Island with us. And then we have, of course, many organizations like the Architects Institute of America with us. We have many advocates, residents, and general public and private organizations. So as you can see, there is a plethora of organizations that work with us to make this go. And so the design team is vast. And so that's what it takes to get this across the finish line. And so each of us have a role that we play, and we're going to get into that. So if we can go to the next slide. And so we're here today to talk about this man, Pyrrhus Concer. And if you look at this, this is the great image that we have of Pyrrhus Concer. And this was his homestead located at 51 Pond Lane, Southampton Village, the heart of the village. And this is his homestead, and we know that this property was owned by his grandparents who were free, and it dates back to 1811, and we know that since 1823, if not earlier, that this property was maintained by his family. So this is the homestead that was a legacy that continues on through his legacy up until we know a certain point. So we look at this property as its significance to not just Northern slavery, but to the fact that it was in the hands and purchased and passed down through the hands of former enslaved persons that are of African descent. So for us, that's really very important to the story of formerly enslaved and the Northern slavery narrative that it often goes on, not really known and not talked about. So that to us is really important. Brenda, would you like to have something to say?
I just want to thank everyone for this opportunity to share Pyrrhus Concer's history. Been working on this project for quite some time, and it's just, I'm glad to embrace the team that we have. It's been working so hard. Hi, Chick, how everybody? I know I haven't seen everybody in a while, but it's just really, really important to share. And whoever's watching, I hope you really pay attention to everything that's happening here about this particular property, and that we get behind to make sure it gets finally restored. And I thank all the officials for being here and everybody who's really, really behind this project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. So when we look at this project, we've been working on it for a very long time, Brenda. So you may want to also jump in and talk about when you began to work on this project. When did this project first come under your radar?
Wow. Now we're going to go all the way back. The first time, I think it was I'm trying to remember the date, the year at that point, when they had a bicentennial in the village of Southampton. And I decided that we should include Pyrrhus Concer in the bicentennial celebration they had in the village. So it goes back that far. And then moving forward, I got a call, I got a message from someone in the town preservation, and they were telling us that this project was about to be torn down. So I immediately formed this Pyrrhus Concer Action Committee, and Georgette, I can't even thank you enough that you have been really taking a serious lead on this, because at one point I kind of gotten exhausted. But also I want to thank Assemblyman Fred Thiel, who's also been very supportive of this project. Anyway, we got to a point where we worked so hard to try to make sure it was reserved. It's too much to talk about all the details of what happened, but it has been a real challenge to get this project back to where it's supposed to be. I don't know
Thank
what
you
else
so much.
you want me to add to that,
No, but
Georgette?
that's good because I just, we always, part of what we want to do is keep the P in preservation, but we also want to just include the people. And that's part of this story too. And the fact that when we think about preservation, we must think about that capital P and include the people in the story because it's preservation, but it's also people and places. And so often we leave that narrative out. We're going to get into the soup and nuts of this, but I just wanted to make sure that we remember that. And just a quick story about the consulate that came over that was looking for this great man of Pyrrhus Concer, because over in Japan, there is a lasting movement.
No, please go, Georgette.
Yeah, no, you just tell the story because I think it's important for what we often hear. And we got a call this weekend from someone who graduated a very long time ago, who grew up in Southampton. And he called this weekend because we unveiled another project. And he says, I grew up in Southampton and I've never heard of this man, Pyrrhus Concer. And I know about the curriculum, and he's not a young man, and he's not a African American man. And he says, I feel cheated that I didn't know about this man, Pyrrhus Concer. And so he's just learning about it, and he feels that he was cheated out of his education because he didn't know about this man. So often we hear this story about people not knowing about Pyrrhus Concer and that they wish that they knew about him. So he's not included in the historic record for many people. So I think it's important for us to talk about when we talk about the historic district and the historic record, that he be included. And so we know that in Japan, he was celebrated, but here in his own hometown, he wasn't, and his legacy is vast. So just remember, preservation includes people and it also includes the place. So this is us correcting the record. And I don't know, at this point, Fred, if you want to jump in, Honorable Fred Thiel, if you want to jump in, and because you've been involved with this project from the beginning, just to give some people a little bit of a background, but I don't want you to go too far into dollars and cents and all you've done, because I'm going to get into the legislative part of that a little bit later.
Well, first of all, thank you, Georgette. It's a pleasure to be invited to participate as part of this, and it's an amazing team that you've assembled, and I work with many of these people in many different capacities, as it turns out. But I wanted to kind of focus on the point that you mentioned, and that is our collective history on the East End. And to me, local history is not adequately covered in our local schools many times, and certainly African American local history is not. And to me, what was so exciting about this project is that it was bringing back to life a part of all of our heritage and all of our tradition that otherwise would have been lost. And as somebody who loves history and had a history major in college, as before I went to law school, to discover this history in our own backyard, and now to be able to, the work that you're doing to bring that to the community at large, I think is something very special. The only other thing I'll say at this point is that all of this should have been preserved up front in the beginning. This was a situation where the Pyrrhus Concer House was under development pressure. We actually had a program, the Community Preservation Fund, that was available to preserve this property. And under a prior administration in Southampton Village, there was a lack of political will at the time to preserve this property. And ultimately things twisted and turned, and I'm sure you'll get into it. But we ultimately had the opportunity to acquire the property, save what was left of the house, and now the opportunity to restore it. So this is really a grassroots community effort, utilizing the tools that are available and having the will to get it done. And my thanks to Brenda and Georgette for, there's nothing that substitutes for perseverance and sticking with something, and that is what has made this possible and why we've gotten as far as we have.
Yes, thank you so much, Assemblyman Thiel. Yes, Chris, you can go to the next slide, because as he was talking about the narrative, I wanted to, this is the house as it stood. Of course, there were iterations, but this is, me and Brenda used to drive by the house every day. This was a long battle that went on in the public purview, and many of course, our trustee, Preservation League of New York State has been there with us throughout this process, supportive of this process. So they know about this, but if you don't, I'm sure you can go back through the blogs and get the history. But me and Brenda used to drive by every day just to look at the house. And this is when they pulled up with the machinery to tear it down. And we participated as tree huggers to try to, you know, as much as we could to not have it go down. But, you know, it was a long process, and we want to stay down the tunnel towards the light. So we'll just keep down that path and not try to go, you know, down that dark hole. But this is the day that the truck pulled up. Next slide, Chris. And so one of the things that was important to us is to continue, and this could be for someone, how do we save everything? But what I will say is, you know, and I'll get into that, how do you save everything? How do you continue to tell this history? And so for us, it was important for us to, and this is important for people to understand, that you have to do outreach and public engagement to bring the attention to this project. So of course, Black History Month is 365 for us. It's not just 1 month. We know that, but we wanted to make sure that we continue to tell this story during Black History Month. We want it in the schools. We're working on getting it into schools, and keep the light on this project and the life and legacy of this man. So we keep it in the newspapers, we keep it in the schools and the museums. And Brenda has a program that is in the local schools. We have a curriculum. And as I said, this weekend, we rolled out the digital tapestry program, a soft launch of an AR experience. And so we welcome you to come back in June to see that program. But this story was also covered on TV, newspapers, etc. Next slide, Chris. And we look at this timeline of when all of this stuff happened. So this is the timeline of how the house was actually torn down, to let you understand the process of what actually happened. Most of you will understand that you need to have the certificate of appropriateness to turn it down. We know that the Architectural Review Board denied it. It was overturned by a lawsuit. And so this was a long process, and we were able to, after negotiation and many ups and downs, and a long story that you can Google for yourself to get the articles and see, that we were able to, the Pyrrhus Concer Action Committee, which is largely headed by me and Brenda, we were able to go in and get the original timbers, which are hand-hewn, and Roman numerals. You'll see a picture of that later. We were able to go in and salvage those original parts and save them. And so from that, we were able to, as Fred said, to get the original parts. Yes, this is the nightmare that we were left with. So you see the timeline from 2013, but of course we started fighting before that. And to see this legacy here, this picture, you'll see that we are really upset with the code, because the code says that if you have anything of architectural significance, but also cultural significance. And for us, we found that not just here in Southampton, but across, you know, across the state and many other places, that there's not an appreciation for structures that don't seem to have the traditional architectural features that people normally see. And that has been the biggest problem for us, that we think that there needs to be more inclusion of structures that don't look, have the features of the traditional you know, renderings that you see. I hear it often, and it comes off as elitist to me. It comes off as othering, you know, like this other stuff doesn't matter. And so I think that we have to look at how we now look at things of inclusion, and make sure that we understand that there's other people that built this country and should be included in the narrative, including women, BIPOC people. So I think that we have to think about that. So that was that truck that pulled up. You saw the house. And this down here is the monument that was built. Brenda, you want to talk about the monument when the Japanese consulate came over? Brenda, you're on mute. Unmute yourself. She's still on mute. Brenda's still on mute. Well,
Okay, I'm good now. When they want to do a celebration in the village of Southampton, and then they found out that the Japanese were coming from the consulate, they were coming to acknowledge and to celebrate Pyrrhus Concer. So they found this anchor in Agawam Lake, and they produced this monument to acknowledge and to show Japan that they were celebrating Pyrrhus Concer. So that's how that came about.
yes, and this was in the 80s, so it wasn't like from his life. And if you look at his life, I think I'll throw in the chat when the design team starts to talk of links. If you understand his life, yes, when people talk about, oh, he was born to an enslaved mother, which constituted his life as indentured, but we don't see a difference in this indentured servitude, because if you understand slavery, there are nuances that we can get into. You would have to take another Zoom or class with us, but he's born to a mother that dictates his station in life. Not only that, we see that he was, sold at a certain age. He worked at a young age as a farmhand. He worked in the blacksmith shop. So we can see his story from birth to death. We know that his parents were born enslaved in Bridgehampton. So this man's life is very extraordinary for many reasons, because we know birth to death, we know his lineage. We know how he died. He earned his freedom. He wasn't given it. He wasn't emancipated. He earned his freedom. He was an entrepreneur. He went to the gold rush. He was on the whaling ship, the Manhattan, that ended up helping the embargo. Once it wasn't opened, he helped, he was on that ship, basically, that helped people navigate back to Japan after the embargo. He left a legacy to the Presbyterian Church for widows in the Presbyterian Church in Southampton that is still existing today. So his life and is in itself remarkable. And when Brenda was saying about Agawam Lake, he was the first and only person to have a CAD ferry service that would take the children from one side of the pond to the other side to get to the beach. And it wasn't just one boat, there were several boats. And when he passed, he even had a last will and testament, which you can also find. So when I say we understand his life from birth to death, that's remarkable. Second, when you usually find someone who's enslaved, you only know their first name. We know his first and last name. We know his whole life. So when we talk about his life as a testament to Northern, slavery in his family lineage, it's really a very remarkable story. And the fact that this land was in his grandparents' hands and passed down, it's an extraordinary story. Next slide. And over here, you will see this is a social media post on the other side. And I will just say, because I want you to really understand too, it has not been easy moving through the stages of municipal code and zoning. So I want you to know that too. Then also, as going through the process of trying to move forward, when you think about municipalities, there are certain rules and laws that we have to take into consideration when it comes to funding. Earlier on in the process, we were going through phases of bidding, and we did have some issues when it comes to certain processes, and just keeping this in the news, because you sometimes come across people and things that are not always on the up and up. And so this process has been long and hard, but we are continuing on. Next slide. This right here is kind of a celebration of his life. When you think about the Long Island Museum in Stony Brook, this museum has been existing at that time for 80 years. And this is the first time that it ever tackled the subject of slavery, which is really remarkable. And you have people who were 80 themselves and said they never knew we've had slavery in the North. You know, and it's one of those things, it's the unspoken thing. And now we're contending with people who, and pundits who decide that CRT is not a real thing or whatever. But yeah, we need to talk about it. We need to have the conversation about slavery and its ramifications. You know, certain laws that still exist now today date back to slavery and slave codes and Black codes that become laundering codes, et cetera. So, you know, when you think about this conversation and the fact that it's been here since the beginning, or slavery could not have survived without the Middle States or the North, and the fact that this is something that we're just now tackling is a real testament to the lack of our discussion and discourse. Next slide. So you see the children, you see the wailing, and not for us to forget that this is who we have to pass this information down, and this is who we're planning this center to be. We want to give it back to the community so that they use it, and that they're able to have these conversations. So that's what we do, and that's why we're doing it for them, for our community. We don't want this building to be a stagnant building, and we have to do it in a way that they take ownership to it. We don't, you know, I remember when we grew up, libraries were quiet. You could not talk, and sometimes you would get popped with a ruler. Now libraries are community centers. You can take out music, you can take out books, they're maker centers. You can go in and take out power tools. So we want this building to reflect what the community wants it to be, because there's no sense in rebuilding a building that the community is not tied to and they don't use it. Because what happens in the next couple of years, you'll need to redo it again, and the community won't invest in it because they have no ties to it. Next slide. And we just want to let you know that we've done archaeology at this site because it was taken down. And because of that, it further proves the point. Brenda?
Yes, we
I thought you wanted
had
to
a
talk about
wonderful,
this brush.
go ahead.
Go ahead, I want you to talk about the brush.
Yes, the brush, we had a wonderful archaeological dig, which I really am very, very grateful that we had that done. We found over 400 items when we did that dig. And that brush, they have identified that brush. It is definitely a calligraphy brush from Japan. And we're thinking, or we're assuming that it was a gift given to Pyrrhus Concer for his helping to rescue the Japanese people. So we're really excited. There's so many awesome items that we found in that archaeological dig. We saw arrowheads. It's just an awesome thing. And we have them sort of, eventually we're going to have those in display in our visitor center soon, one day.
Yeah. Yep. And so with those, and also, you know, the archaeological dig also proved a lot of the history that supposedly wasn't there. Next slide. And this is the reenactment of the CAD Ferry Boat that we have, which is a part of the Interpretive Visitor Center's sustainability plan. See, you know, when you think about this, you know, oh, well, how are you gonna upkeep the museum, et cetera. So we even have a sustainability plan that we had to do for the museum. So this is a part of it. Not only is this the CAD Ferry Boat, which was led by Nick Palumbo, but we're also involved with the Sea Cadets. So we're partnering also with local community groups that will run it. So that's also in the site plan. Next slide. Oh, wait, go back. I just want you to see, you can't see it over there, but we have diversity and inclusion, because we had, at this time, we had a female captain, and on the boat in there is the picture of Pyrrhus Concer. And so when you ride on it, you would definitely get the story of Pyrrhus Concer. And might I add that is intergenerational. This is not a museum where everybody's old or everybody's young. It's intergenerational. Next slide. And then that's us with the marker. We wanted to make sure that the land, even the house came down, that the site was not stagnant. This was an effort of, me and Brenda and the village at that time to make sure that the property had the sign and that we were there to make sure that there was recognition of him in the village. And also the street was rededicated with his name to be called Concer's Way.
Yes.
Even though the house was torn down, Concer was still going to have his way at the end of the day. Next slide. Next slide, Chris. Yes. And this is Joseph Mcgill from the Slave Dwelling Project. We had him to come out and to look at the property. And then that's us just pointing to the fact that even though the house came down, we still pressed on and moved forward because the fat lady, so to speak, had not sung yet. And we still were determined to tell his history at the end of the day. Next slide. And this was the public acknowledgement that, we were endeavoring to continue to move forward. And we take a lot of pictures because there were a lot of politicians in here that you guys who are not local wouldn't know. And we want to make sure that we hold everybody accountable. And so we can cash those checks when it's time. So that's why it's important to take pictures when you have events like this. So that's part
Georgia,
of the
might add
pictures.
something to that?
Go ahead.
Might add something to that. When I was up talking, I always remember when I see that, I can't help forget when I was talking about him being a philanthropist and how he started that Widows Fund and that educational fund. And a woman in that audience raised her hand. She was from the Presbyterian Church, and she acknowledged that that educational fund was still active as of that day. And that was 2015.
Yeah, amazing. Next slide. And this is just another issue to tell you that even though this house was within the historic district, and when you're in a historic district, there are certain rules that you must follow, and it was not followed by the village at that time. Not only was it not followed, if you go back to the beginning when historic districts were created, they did not include our history the right way, and it was not landmarked. Not to be on a sour note, but I want to make sure that when people are considering history, that you consider others and look at what is missing from the picture. What can we now include? And that's the point that we want to make sure is happening moving forward. And this is the hand-hewn timbers. What we had to do is actually take this up in the island and rebuild what we could rebuild to see if it could be salvaged, what parts needed to be now included, if they needed to be included, new parts. And so now we're moving forward to now the design phase, but we had to actually do that. Let's see what the next slide is, Chris, because I think I'm in the design team's territory, and I'm going to give it over to Chick now so he can do his bidding. We also have, you see money there. So I have Nicole, who's responsible for the money. So I'm at this point, I want to bring Chick in.
Great. Thank you, Georgette. I did want to do a brief introduction of myself and the overall design team and the application process. But Georgette, with your permission, it might be good for Jesse Warren, the mayor of the village of Southampton, to say a few words first.
Absolutely. If the mayor's on, I know the mayor was here. Is he still here? He's yes, Mayor, if you're here, please come on.
Okay. So this is obviously the plan. We'll talk dollars and cents with Nicole Christian, who's the Southampton Village grant writer, among other municipalities, and you've got Chick from Nelson Pope and Voorhees, as well as his team that will talk about the design. But in the interim, what I think it's important to talk about is that public support and support from the elected officials is critical in this process. And as we said at the very beginning, having a collaborative effort to get everyone involved is very important. Now, we're not going to spend any more time talking about what happened in the past, other than the fact that I can tell you that if I were mayor at the time, I could assure you that this never would have happened. I would have been standing there with Dr. Key trying to make sure that bulldozers never came. But we have a historic district and there's certain protocols and procedures need to take place. Now, that being said, we've taken a number of steps to ensure that our community is aware and we can garner as much support as we can and get as much assistance as we can. So one of the first things we did in this process was we reached out to the town of Southampton. We presented the site plan, which Chick and designs that Chick is going to speak about. And then we have an intermunicipal agreement with the town in order to manage this property. Secondly, we went to the Architecture Review Board. We sponsored the application. And with the help of the ARB, we actually finally landmarked the property on the local level, which was also important in order to request funds from the Community Preservation Fund or the CPF fund. But all of these steps that we took place are really important to cement the legacy of Pyrrhus Concer. We also put forth a resolution to make sure we bound the board to financially back the project. And then last year, alongside all the members of the Pyrrhus Concer Action Committee, Dr. Key and Brenda Simmons, we went in front of the town board and requested CPF funding. And we have secured at least a verbal commitment for upwards of $1 million to rebuild the homestead. And in addition, money from the water quality, the WQIP CPF fund, in order to add a new IA septic system, which is a low nitrogen septic system. Anytime that we have an opportunity to promote and raise awareness and to recognize this project, we do so. For example, last summer, we held the first annual State of the Village address, and the work being done.
Mayor, can I just stop you for a minute? Since this is kind of like where I wanted to go to the end. So Chris, can you go to 22? Because since the mayor is talking about this is exactly what I wanted to talk about. So can we skip to slide 22 just so like people could preface what he's talking about? Because this is, just go to slide 22. Mayor, you can go right ahead, please.
So we were talking about the, if we get to slide 22, we were talking about the State of the Village address, which we put on for the first time last year. And we made sure that this was an important part of that State of the Village address. Now, this project personally inspired me to continue to push on, because this has been a long process where we've had some successes and some opportunities where we needed to keep on pushing forward. But if you look at the legacy of Pyrrhus Concer, if you look at all of his hard work and determination to get where he was, that is just should be inspiration for all of us to move forward. So any opportunities, again, we had. So the State of the Village address, we mentioned this. I was invited by Dr. Key to attend a conference by the New York Museum Association in New York City, which I was, had the privilege of attending. And then myself and my own internal team, we consider this project one of the top priorities as we continue to push forward. But we, of course, need the leadership of Dr. Key, as well as Brenda Simmons, and our entire team here, as you'll see, everything from land use and zoning attorneys to planners, architects, and Osmond, who's not here today, to do the parking study, as well as Nicole, who's our grant writer, who has helped us and will continue to help us secure the necessary grant funding. But there's so much more that could be said. I'm happy to also jump back in. I know we only have an hour of time, but as you see here, every member of our team is critical to the success, and we're going to keep on pushing. There's always some roadblocks in place. This particular project had more than others, as could be imagined, but there's nothing that's going to stop us from working to get this project completed. But we do have some hope as far as all the money that we have commitments for, and our site plan and other types of work that we've already done. And we'll get to this part later, but we're essentially waiting for some variances moving forward. And once we get those, we'll be ready to go.
Thank you so much, Mayor, and thank you for your leadership on this. And just on that vein, I want to bring in Assemblyman Fred Thiel too, because I really think it's important to talk about that, because one of the things is people say, well, do you have government support? And for us, government support is not just a smile in the grin and a photo op. It's also putting it on legislation and in funding. And we know that if anybody can do that, it is definitely Fred Thiel. And that's what we're talking about, the resolutions, the letters, because we also need letters. We need the mini meetings and different things like that. So Fred, Assemblyman, can you talk to us about similarly, what have you done? Because I think to make this work, we need laws, we need money. It wouldn't have happened without the legislation that you are responsible for, the Community Preservation Fund. And now I understand that there's other places, like you're on mute, Assemblyman.
Yep.
Like I hear that Westchester now has this law also, and we now added on for affordable housing. If you can just talk to us about that.
Sure, and you've heard the letters CPF used a lot here today. That's our Community Preservation Fund, which has been in place since 1998, and a lot of people know about that fund because it was used to acquire open spaces. It was used to acquire farmland preservation parcels in our area, but historic preservation is also a key and critical element of this. And because to do this work requires money. So the Community Preservation Fund has had a key role to play in acquiring land. And we're looking at the Pyrrhus Concer project here today. The land was acquired with Community Preservation Fund money. Similarly with the Southampton African American Museum, that property was also acquired with the Community Preservation Fund money. So it can be used to acquire land and to acquire historic buildings, but just as critical and just as important is that the fund can also be used for the restoration and rehabilitation of these properties. And that's what's going to happen here. Community Preservation Fund money will be a key part of being able to do the restoration. The village, through Jesse Warren's leadership, and he has been a stalwart also in trying to make this project happen, also has put village funds into this property. And for those things that the Community Preservation Fund can't pay for, we were able to secure a state grant. So the funding is important. It's been, village, town, and state, working together with your committee to help to get this done. But as you say, it's the grants are good, but that moral support I think is really important too. And there's been a couple of key times during this process where there've been bumps in the road, and for elected officials, I think, to show up and but not just put their money, but also put their mouth, behind this project, and that's what we've attempted to do. And let me just say that Jesse's been great to work with here. It's been a different approach from the village, from the mayor than what we had before. And he's not here today, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention Supervisor Jay Schneiderman and the effort that the town has made. So enough from hearing from politicians. I want to hear what Chick has to say about how this project's going to roll out. So thank you, Georgette.
Thank you so much. Before Chick goes, we got to hear from the money person, Nicole, because we heard about IA, we heard about town. So just quickly, Nicole, if you can give us the money stuff, and then we'll have Chick go.
Everyone, I do have to actually teach a fundraising class at 5 o'clock at LIU, and thank you, Chick, for letting me jump in, and Mayor Warren and Assemblyman Deal, Dr. Key, Brendan, the esteemed guests and panelists here. The village, Mayor Jesse and the trustees brought me on at a critical stage of development, and one of the things that I was able to help the Pyrrhus Concer Action Committee develop, along with the village and even with state officials, is the fund development strategy, which is really a three-legged stool, because everyone thinks about the construction as an endpoint, when in reality, first stage, which is looking at construction and redevelopment. So the three-legged stool is essentially fundraising, grants, and donations, and program management, program fees, et cetera. But I wanted you to see that so that you would understand how we structured the discussion about what we do moving forward from here. We blend in the threads from the local level, from the village, all the way up to the state and even the federal level. And then we start looking at the other two legs of the stool, which is the grants, not just from municipalities, but also donations, and fees and gifts in kind. So that was just what I wanted to share today, is that one of the things that I think the Pyrrhus Concer Action Committee did very well and extremely astutely was developing a fund development strategy that encapsulated not just the construction, but also what happens after this. So that's what I think the committee has built a very strong foundation with elected officials in the host community, the municipality, which is the village, which is critical, is making sure that the host community is supportive of the package and supportive of the project. And then the development strategy is a living document. So thank you. I just wanted to share that with you all.
Thank you. And we have the numbers there. You can, again, this has been a very public process. You can look up the numbers, or we have it on the PowerPoint, but now Chick, you have it. I think Chris has control of the PDF if you want to share it, but Chick, you have the floor.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I know we have a lot of different professionals and interested people participating today. So I'm going to cover a number of things that have to do with the land use application process, and specifically the environmental planning parts of that. We also have our land use attorney, Keith Brown, here, as well as Chris Voorhees, who's our engineer. Just by way of introduction, my name is Chick Voorhees. I'm with the firm Nelson Pope Voorhees. I've been doing environmental planning on Long Island and the tri-state area for about 44 years. Let me also say that I'm humbled to be here today to share our land use application experiences for this last day of Black History Month. And I'm very happy to be involved with this very important project. I started with this project roughly a year ago at the request of Mayor Warren, who spoke earlier. We've made a lot of progress to date, but you'll find that the land use application such as this does take a lot of time, and it involves many levels of government and agency coordination. As the environmental planner for the project, I assist a team of professionals, including attorneys, civil engineers, traffic engineers, architects, landscape architects, and grant specialists, as well as representatives of the applicant in the processing of the applications as they pertain to the project. And specifically, that project is the Pyrrhus Concer Homestead and Visitor Center. My firm is affiliated with Nelson & Pope, which is an engineering firm, has sanitary, civil engineering, traffic engineering, and architecture services as well. So we integrate those services where needed to advance projects such as this. A project to establish a permanent land use as a museum involves multiple agency approvals. So my role is to provide complete application materials for agency processing, as well as to assist with team coordination and public meetings. And you'll hear that we've had many. Agencies involved with approving this project include the Village Planning Board for a site plan, the Village Zoning Board of Appeals for variances, the Village Architectural Review Board for architecture, and the Village Board of Trustees for a special permit, as well as parking relief. Also, the Town Board, and Jay Schneiderman, the supervisor, was mentioned before, is a co-owner of the project. They've been assisting with funding and support throughout the process. And finally, the Environmental Conservation Office of the New York State DEC has issued and is involved as a freshwater wetlands permit application. So my staff involved with support services involves GIS specialists, environmental scientists, planners, and project managers that integrate with other team members. An area of extensive work includes the Environmental Quality Review Act of New York State, also known as SEQR. And New York state law requires agencies to evaluate environmental impacts of any decision to grant, fund, or approve a project. SEQR starts with an environmental assessment form and an application to boards that may approve the project. The board with the greatest jurisdiction generally completes a coordinated review with other involved agencies. In this case, the planning board assumed lead agency. And then the lead agency is responsible to issue a determination of significance. If impacts are anticipated with a project, they have to issue a positive declaration and require an environmental impact statement. And if there are no impacts, then a negative declaration is appropriate. For this project, the planning board has issued a negative declaration, and that's a major step forward with the project. I've also provided planning reports as support for special permit applications and variances. There are a number of criteria that have to do with, is there an undesirable change to a neighborhood? Can the benefits sought by the applicant be achieved by other methods? Are variances substantial? And is there an environmental impact? And all of those items have been addressed by this application. We have received a special permit from the village board, and we are pending in front of the zoning board for variances. And once that's complete, we'll go to the planning board for site plan approval, and then finally the architectural review board. So those items are necessary for support. I did mention a DEC wetlands permit. A portion of the property is within 100 feet of Lake Agawam, a freshwater wetland in New York State. So we had to identify and determine that this project will not impact fish and wildlife habitat, filtration of pollutants, that it provides and continues to provide educational opportunities and water quality protection. And the New York State DEC has issued a permit. On our team through Nelson and Pope, we do have traffic and parking engineers and professionals, and we've had to provide a report looking at relief of parking requirements and available parking within the area in order to accommodate the project. And so a professional level report has been prepared and is part of the application process and has been used for permits to date. Architects within our company also prepare rendered site plans, architectural floor plans, building elevations, and modeling if needed. And floor plans are used to determine occupancy of the building, parking requirements, fire access, and related items. And elevations of the building are used to present the style of architecture for architectural review. Finally, and Nicole Jean was here and is here, we provide grant support, and that's involved appearing at various meetings for grant funding agencies. We did provide support for a sanitary system grant that involved nitrogen budget for water quality impact evaluation and various support services that are needed as part of the team. So at this time, we're about a year into the land use review process. We've reached a number of milestones, and we still have some approvals to go, as Mayor Warren mentioned. So in closing, I'm excited to be part of this team. We're deeply committed to the rebuilding of the Pyrrhus Concer House to promote an awareness and understanding of Black history on Eastern Long Island and throughout the region. And Pyrrhus Concer was a significant figure in local and regional history. The recreation of the homestead and the reconstruction or construction of a visitor center will provide a facility to preserve and exhibit historical collections and provide educational awareness. So I thank you. Georgette, I'll send it back to you for other team support. And I do believe doing us as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I still have up Keith and Chris. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Sure. If you want me to get into the detail about the zoning approval process, I could do that.
Okay, we have a few minutes. Yes.
Sure. I'll be quick. So thank you for the opportunity to participate on the panel. It's really been marvelous to be part of this project. I was brought in by Chick Voorhees a little over a year ago because it was necessary to have some zoning expertise, in terms of we live in an age of specialization, and I kind of feel that my role has been almost like a surgeon to make sure that we could get through the various municipal approvals that were necessary. And it was a pretty involved project from the perspective that you not only had the town of Southampton, but the village of Southampton. And within the village of Southampton, we have been basically dealing with 4 boards, the Board of Trustees, the Planning Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals and soon to be the Architectural Review Board. But as Fred Thiel spoke, Assemblyman Fred Thiel spoke a moment ago that he was a history major. I was actually an English major, poli-sci and history minor at SUNY Albany. And for the opportunity to jump on a project like this, it's very rare for a zoning attorney to be involved with something of such historical significance. And it really gives an opportunity for us to really, pay it forward and also pay back the community. So, we agreed to do this project on a pro bono basis. We've spent about 175 hours and about 25 meetings with the various municipal approving boards. But it's been a worthwhile project because of the fact that we ran into a couple of stumbling blocks during the approval process. Normally what we do as zoning attorneys is when we look at a project, we normally put together what's called a zoning feasibility analysis, and we lay out for the client what we think the exact process is going to be and what are some of the issues, and can we mitigate any of those issues along the way. This was a little different because the project was already before us. Bob Nelson and Chick and Chris Voorhees had already started going in front of the various boards. So we were kind of dealing with things as they came to us. And one of the major issues that really hit us square in the face was this issue of whether or not we were truly a museum or whether or not we were an educational institution. And we were in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, which, one thing I have to make very clear is that all of these boards are independent boards, and they are not subject to any other board's influence. So the fact became what the Zoning Board of Appeals was kind of stuck on this issue of whether or not we were a museum or an education institution. And we went in front of the board and we just very simply argued that from a perspective, just looking at Merriam-Webster's dictionary, the definition of museum is an institution devoted to the procurement, care, study, and display of objects of lasting interest or value. We felt by hanging our hat on that definition, that should have been enough to overcome the zoning board. Unfortunately, there was a couple of board members that it wasn't enough. They were concerned. They wanted to delve deeper into that issue. And it just became a real problem because we didn't fit in their mind squarely within one of the definitions or the other. So therefore, we had to go back to the Board of Trustees and ask them to basically amend the code to make it clear that we are a museum and this use is allowed on this property. And once we did that, it kind of opened up the path forward and gave us a clear path to the rest of the zoning approvals that we're going to need. So at this juncture, we could see the horizon at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. And that, our next step, now that we have our secret approval from the planning board that we just recently got within the last couple of weeks, we hope to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, obtain our variances, then go to the Architectural Review Board and get their approval, and then wrap it up by going back to the planning board and getting final site plan approval. And then the museum will be in a position to obtain their building permits finally after all of this time has gone by. So I just want to thank you and Brenda Simmons and Nicole Christian, who I knew many moons ago, for the opportunity. And I could think of no better way to celebrate Black History Month than to talk about how we were able to preserve Black history, because Black history is American history. And I'm really proud to be a part of the project. So thanks very much.
Chris, you didn't have one thing to say. I'm going to close it over to you. And thank you, everybody, so much. And after Chris speaks, Katie's going to come on and we're going to close this thing out.
All right. So I'm going to pick up where we dive into a little bit more technical. I'll keep it brief because I know the time is short. So this is the site that we've been discussing. We have three buildings on the site, one of them being the proposed reconstructed Pyrrhus Concer house, as well as an existing historic cottage. There's also a proposed visitor center to display a lot of those historic elements that have been found through the archaeology, as well as a lot of the hard work and research done by the team. So the first part of the process is, as discussed, the zoning. The initial phase is the site plan layout or alignment of the site. We review the village code and perform a zoning analysis to determine what kind of village requirements would be applicable for our site. Similar typical requirements are building gross floor areas, building heights, setbacks, parking, and accessory structure requirements. Due to the small size of this site, there are many design elements that have to be considered. It was determined through the design process that not all of the zoning requirements would be met or be able to be met. And so at that point, the site plan was designed to minimize those variance waivers or reliefs requested. The site design also considers fire access, site accessibility, general vehicular and pedestrian movement. A unique feature on this site is a shared access driveway that had to be that provides access to a landlocked property at the rear of the subject site. The site plan was developed to provide access to this property during development and after. Part of the site plan design is the grading plan of a site. Now, this site has a significant amount of grade change. The lot is about 0.8 of an acre and only approximately 300 feet deep. There is a grade change from elevation 8 to approximately elevation 24. And this presents significant considerations when designing accessible walkways throughout the site. There are several small retaining walls that are utilized, as well as sections of walkway ramps and landings that will provide resting locations and vistas. The design of the walkways will provide access to all of these structures on site, meeting current accessible code. In addition to working with the constraints of the natural topography, there's an existing structure that is to remain and part of the site plan development. This was considered in part of the grading design. In addition to grading, drainage is a large consideration when doing site plan design. The subject property is located directly adjacent to a surface water body, Lake Agawam, and the expected groundwater was found to be near the surface and very close to the surface within the lower elevations of the site. Long Island stormwater design is typically a containment volume that is based upon a stormwater runoff coefficient as well as a stormwater rainfall event. That volume is captured and recharged into the natural substrata and into the aquifer of the ground. So because the site has a large grade change, it's good practice to capture stormwater as much as possible in the higher elevations, and that's why you can see several different stormwater containment areas. In addition to the drainage design, as mentioned before, a sanitary system has been proposed that is well, historically on Long Island, sanitary systems were comprised of a septic tank and leaching structures that would recharge the wastewater into groundwater. In recent years, Suffolk County has required new construction to utilize a system known as an innovative alternative on-site wastewater treatment system, or more commonly known as an IA system. This has a similar makeup to the conventional systems. It provides a pretreatment system that is upstream of the recharge. The IA system has aeration and agitation that will promote microbial breakdown of the wastewater. The site also incorporates an ejector pump system that provides a low pressure force main that connects the existing historic structure to the newly constructed wastewater treatment system. In addition to sanitary, there's also water services being proposed, both domestic and fire systems, as well as providing an existing water service to remain to provide service to the adjacent resident in the rear of the lot. Water also includes water meters and backflow preventions. The stormwater also incorporates green infrastructure. We have located on site 2 stormwater collection ponds, also known as the Tranquility Ponds. Those structures both have an aesthetic benefit to the site, as well as providing a high water elevation when rainfall fills up the ponds that inundates a fringe of native wetland vegetation that provides pre-treatment before overflowing in conventional stormwater systems. That is the brief overview of the site development plan.
Thank you all so much. Before we wrap up, Georgette, did you have any last words about this project before we close out for the evening?
Well, I just want to thank you so much, Katie, for inviting us to take part in this, and thank the League for their ongoing support of this particular project, but for as a whole, for their support of the East End and Long Island and just what they do on the state. I want to thank my team. As you can hear, this is only one engineer. Just imagine if I had the whole team here. Each of them could do a specific course. So just imagine our meetings that we have. My team is great, and they know what I say. I miss Bob not being on the call, because I say, Bob, is it going to cost me anything? What's going to happen? Cut it. Not. So I just really think that we have a great team, and the project has been, as Assemblyman Thiel said, we've cried some nights. We've been angry, we've been happy. And so I think in the end, it's going to be a rewarding project. And I think it's going to be a gift for the community and the greater society as a whole. So I'm happy that I was able to present, and we're at a spot that potentially this year we will be breaking ground. So I thank you, and my partner in this, Brenda Simmons. It's been a long time coming, but we're here now. And I think, of course, like I said, Assemblyman Fred Thiel, we wouldn't be here without his guidance and support in just about everything that we do. And of course, Mayor Jesse, I thank you so much. And of course, Chick, sometimes he has to take a break from us and go on his boat or do something, because we stress him out a lot too. But thank you so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you all for taking time to speak with us today. I think this is such an interesting project. And when I was talking to Georgette when we were setting this up, I just think, when we talk about the future of preservation, I think interdisciplinary coalition building and working collaboratively across disciplines is so important. Preservationists cannot work in a vacuum. So this project really exemplifies that in an interesting way. So I'm excited that they were all able to share that with you all who tuned in, and definitely look up their progress and follow along on their great adventure out on the East End. And hopefully, as Georgette said, hopefully ground will be broken this year, which would be very exciting. So thank you all. If you are not connected with the League, please do so. We're on all the social media, and we have more great programs coming up, and we can't wait to share them with you. So thank you, and have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.